Hey, Team Wilpers, everybody. I am honored to be here with Allison Bradley. Thanks, Allison, for joining me. You're the next volunteer for my athlete spotlight section of this challenge. So what a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, cool. This is going to be fun. So, all right, cool. I know a couple things. I always start with those I know, and we have some things in common, and I'll just mention a few, but then maybe you can take over from there. But you're a parent and you have a husband who maybe travels for work, and you
hmm
have an 8-year-old who rides cyclocross bikes. That's very cool.
Yeah.
W-
Yes, yeah.
You also have a job and a career and life of your own. So why don't you tell us, what am I missing? Tell us about yourself, please.
I mean, yeah, I think that is probably a big part of it. And part of a big thing with my athletic career is also just like managing, injuries, because that's a part of it too. So I can, and how to keep the long game in mind when you manage your injuries and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that's kind of mostly me in a nutshell. I live in a city neighborhood, so sometimes that's interesting as a cyclist as well, and where you choose to ride and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Tell us about, you've had a big injury or many little injuries, or tell us about that.
Many little injuries. So it's actually an injury that got me into cycling. I was in a pretty bad car accident 20 years
Ooh.
ago, and I did cycling as part of my rehab. And I really wasn't an athlete before that. Like I had done a little bit of track in high school, but wasn't an athlete, and I loved the cycling. And so I used my pain and suffering money to buy a bike. Got into it. I'm an endurance athlete, and so I did a charity endurance thing. Loved it. The next season, they had me come on as like an assistant, like ride leader, coach person, and I loved that. I loved helping the new athletes. And then life-wise, kind of got circumstances where I didn't cycle as much. And then I was more running because of traveling. And then I took a motherhood break because that happens to a lot of us. And life is life, especially if you work. And
Yep,
in
totally.
2019, I decided I was like, she's old enough to do like be carried behind things, and like snacks are really great motivators with her at that age, and really still now too at 8. And snacks are motivators for me too. I don't know about you, but yeah, exactly. We all love snacks. So I was like, if I pack the right snacks and carry her on rides, that'll be good. So we started riding as a family again, which is really awesome. My husband is a mountain biker that tolerates asphalt. And so we were doing that, and my daughter loved hiking, and we did a hike for her birthday. She was like 4, and she needed me to carry her, and I injured myself. And so that's when
Oh,
yeah, and it was really sad for me because I'd been spinning, but then I finally got back on the outdoor bike. And so I actually work for a hospital system, a pediatric hospital system, and as an employee, I'm allowed to go see sports med. So it was really great because I made a relationship with my sports med doc and a physical therapist, and it's one that I've just kind of had to jump in and out of, And I think as athletes, whether you're like racing or competitive or anything, finding like a good home based team that you can like engage with when you need to, is really great. So yeah, so I've seen them for a few things over the years, varying things since 2019. They've been my team, and I've done a lot of cycling things since then, and trained for some really super cool things, done some cool rides of my own, and yeah. So that's kind of
yeah,
the
yeah.
gist of
You
it.
mentioned ultra training and training at altitude. What does that look like? I mean, ultra training sounds pretty big. What's going on?
Yeah, so I have always loved endurance work. I don't know, I think I've got the mindset for like slow and steady and discipline, or like good pace and discipline, and not having to burn myself out. So that's something I've always enjoyed. And so when I started getting back into like outdoor riding in 2019 and 2020, I started doing like a lot of riding on my own, and I made like a big, hairy, audacious goal of like doing 150 miles at a time,
Ooh.
solo, unsupported, and I started training for that. And
Indoors or outdoors?
outdoors.
Outdoors. All right,
Yeah,
cool.
and so just solo by myself, because I'm like, I've done so many centuries over the years. Let's go bigger than century. So
Yeah.
I trained for that, and I did that, and there was an injury along the way I had to deal with, and some other personal stuff that made it hard. That made it a pretty big accomplishment to get it done. Um, but so I started doing that, and then a month after I had completed that, I kind of learned that ultra cycling was actually like a racing discipline, not UCI, but it is a racing discipline. And so the current world champion for 24-hour world champion was putting together a development team with the focus of developing women, but newer athletes. So I put in an application, I got accepted.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah. So I trained with her team, and I got paired with another newer ultra athlete, and she was actually even a lot newer to cycling. And we were going to do 24 hours. So I was going to do 16 of those 24, and she was planning on doing 8. So it was like a 2-person relay. So I
Right.
trained for that. I executed the training super awesome. Stayed pretty healthy throughout of it. And then training weekend, the world was on ice in this country, and I live in the Midwest, and the race was in Texas, and like it was like a few years ago, it was February, and basically half the country was covered in ice, and so I couldn't get
Right.
out.
I think I remember.
I know, yeah, it was very sad, but it is what it is. I learned so much from being a part of that team, and I just made some really good friends. I have a friend who is like an age group world champion in her 70s, who has become a dear friend of my whole family through that team. So it was a cool experience, and I learned so much about training and also so much about my abilities, and I think I had never thought I could race, and I kind of had this imposter syndrome because sometimes the cycling community isn't always nice. And to newer cyclists, let's just be honest and transparent about that. And so I think it was really cool that like this world-class athlete accepted me and was like, hey, I'm going to help you learn. And it was just something that gave me confidence that I hadn't had before.
You touched on a few things like inclusivity and confidence, just in the end of what you were saying, which are really resonating because we are here in this big community. So you've found the challenge. That's amazing. First of all, the ultra training and being accepted onto that team and doing the training, and I can't believe you didn't get to do the actual event, but maybe again in the
Yeah.
future. But kind of relating it to our Team Wilpers Challenge or Team Wilpers Cycling group, I mean, you're a part of this bigger community. How does the challenge schedule fit in with you've done all of this big ultra ultra cycling training, and you mentioned altitude as well.
Yeah.
How does the challenge schedule that I'm giving out, how does that fit in?
It was kind of amazing this year, to be completely honest. It was so serendipitous. So my family spends the first half of the summer in Utah and New Mexico. My extended family's in New Mexico, and we love southern Utah because my husband's a mountain biker, Zion's in our backyard. So I work remotely from there. My husband's job has a lot of flexibility. We train remotely there. So I was, training at altitude, having all these great rides, like, riding into Bryce Canyon, like riding in Park City, like just doing all these super, like riding along the Virgin River, riding in Zion Park, like on a regular basis. It was amazing and brilliant. And then we were on holiday in Uray, Colorado area, Ridgeway to be exact. And I had a household accident where I actually suffered a really large, major second-degree burn that was like huge. It was 20 inches in diameter.
Oh my gosh.
It was kind of traumatic too, to be completely honest, but I can talk about it now. But and so obviously I was off the bike. So I mean, the first thing I asked the CR doctor is like, when can I ride again? And he kind of laughed at me, like, you literally can't even like. He listed all the things I literally couldn't functionally do, let alone ride. So I kind of, so I had to take some time off the bike. But here's the thing: I have this charity event going on October 6th. And it's the CEO of my company, who I serendipitously, it's kind of a fun favorite word of mine, met through this random breakout in this huge department meeting. And we ended up finding out we were both cyclists. And he's like, I'm going to build this team because I want to win this event, this charity event. But he's like, I want to win it. And so last year we did it, and 3 of us on the team were like getting off COVID. So we got 3rd place. But I knew I had that coming up in October. And I'm like, I just took 5 weeks off the bike because I had this injury, and now this event is super cool. It's like in our downtown, and there's spin bikes, and basically the distance is calculated the same way by watts, just like a Peloton.
Oh, cool.
So I was planning on doing an FTP building. So I'm like, I don't need distance right now. I just need output, because output equals miles equals winning equals not looking like an idiot in front of my CEO and the other rest of the team. So I was going to plan on doing my own program, or maybe doing one of the Peloton bike programs. And all of a sudden there's this post, and it's like FTP building for 6 weeks. I'm like, this is literally perfect. So
Yeah,
I
it's meant to
joined it.
be.
I know it really was like perfect timing. So I joined it to be able to get that FTP back up after, having that time off the bike due to the injury. So
Oh, good. So you're testing with me tomorrow.
no, I already did test.
You already did.
So
All
because
right.
tomorrow I've got a birthday party for an 8-year-old, so
Tomorrow's
I
your
test.
birthday party. All right, cool.
Yeah, but
Gotcha.
I
So you
tested
already
on
did test.
Wednesday.
How'd it
Yes.
go? How'd the test go?
So it went interesting and it went well. So I had manually adjusted my FTP because I'm like, I'm coming off an injury. Like, I'm not doing that to myself. So I think I under adjusted it because I wanted to be safe. And like you said, when people make manual adjustments, they usually overestimate. So I guess I did the opposite. So I ended up getting like a 19-point increase because I clearly under
Yeah,
adjusted
nice.
it.
Woohoo.
Yeah, and I had a little bit of a leg cramp at about 5 minutes to go, and I was like, "There's no way I'm going below my previous average." And I held on. It got better after 3 minutes, and then I was able to push out the last 2 minutes like much higher and still get the average I thought my fitness was. So it worked out really well.
Yeah, nicely done. Nicely done. Well,
Yeah,
that's motivating. I mean, you had your previous number and you have this event coming up fairly soon, a couple weeks it sounds like.
yeah, a couple weeks.
And
Yeah.
that's all awesome motivation. I'm sure your family your daughter is a motivator. She races cyclocross or she just trains on
Yes.
cyclocross?
She
Tell me about
just
that. By the way, my,
she.
my daughter is 7, if I didn't mention that, and she is a
Oh,
terror
cool.
on her little fat mountain bike that she rides around. She loves it. So
Yeah. So my daughter loves mountain biking too, and at least where we live, you can't really race until you're a little bit older than she is. And so,
yeah,
but there's a big cyclocross. I live in like the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and there's a big cyclocross community. We have a really great kids team here. So she was just eligible, like just became old enough to race. So she joined the team. She is loving it. She's racing on a mountain bike because we're like, she grows too much. We're not getting you a CX bike and a mountain bike. Sorry, honey.
yeah,
Because
right.
they grow like weeds. You know this. So
Yes.
yeah, so she's racing. So she's doing. She's done one race so far. She's got a few coming up, and it's been really good. It's been really good to teach her things and like, just like kind of. She's in the room when I do Peloton workouts a lot, and so like she picks it up and like it's monkey see, monkey do. After her first race, it was like kind of long and hard, and she didn't know what to expect, and there was a lot of like us running tape sides. So I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with cyclocross, but there's like tape, like the courses are taped out. And so my husband and I are like zigzagging all over the place because this is her first one, and she's like racing against 12-year-olds. So we're like, zigzagging. She's like, "Mommy, I can't do it." I'm like, "Okay, you know what, honey? Let's walk the bike to here. Then you have a downhole. You can hop back on. We're not going to stop, but we can walk. We can walk and catch our breath." So afterwards, she's done. She's like, "How are you proud of yourself?" And she's like, and then she finally calms down. She's like, "It's so hot." So she's like, "I'm like, well, why don't we get something to eat?" And she's like, "Oh no, mommy, I need protein. I need protein first thing."
Ah.
And I was laughing because I am so good about my recovery protein, especially when doing longer efforts. And so in her brain, she's like, "I can't eat food. You need to go make me a shake, mommy, because
That's
before I have any
hilarious.
food,
Yes.
you have to have I have to have a protein shake." So I went to the car and made her a protein shake, and then she was
Of
willing to
course
eat.
you did. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome. Oh, she must
yeah.
be thrilled. She is the center of attention, and what a good role model you are for her.
Oh,
Because look at what she's getting into instead of
yeah.
any other bad habits. It could be what a positive thing. So keep
Yeah,
it
she
easy for
also
her. Keep it light. Let her
like
lead the way.
yes,
And sure,
yes, and
she's
she
just
was
a
so
kid, and
proud of herself. I did tell you something really funny. We went for a celebration pizza afterwards because that's what you do, and
nothing
we
better
tell
for the
the
whole
server.
family for her to feel proud, and then you go celebrate. Oh, that's great.
Oh yeah, so we tell the server. I said, when the pizzas come out, could you take a picture of all of us with the pizzas and the three of us? Because she just had her first bike race, and she's like, "I got 56th place," and she was like ecstatic. And my husband and I are like trying to bite our lips because it's so hilarious for someone to be so excited about 56th place. And the server was like, "That's better than 57th." And she's like, "I know, I wasn't last. Like 3 people finished after her, but she was so
Oh, God
excited."
bless. That's amazing. Good for her.
Yeah, so it was
Good
really
for
fun.
her. Oh, that's cool. Well, so you've got quite a background in cycling, and you're now part of this Team Wilpers community that is training, and you've got motivation and your daughter into it. But with all of the years experience, do you have any advice for somebody just getting started? Maybe they've just finished their first challenge, or maybe they're gonna start this one coming up in the next a couple weeks they're going to start. Do you have any advice for somebody just getting started?
Yeah, I would say, I'm going to I'm going to tap into two Peloton instructors, and I would just say, like, train smart, like Matt says, like, train smart. There's so much excitement you can have about, like, wow, my zone 2 is so easy. Maybe I should ride in zone 3. Or you know what? Like, I realized, well, I have the experience to do, but I realized, like, my FTP was a little low, so I did adjust a little bit at the end there. But even at the beginning, I'm like, I think this is a little low, but I'm like, I'm going to trust the process, and I'm going to stay in, like, the right zone. I'm going to stay at what Greg is telling me. And so I think train smart, like, that is going to be one of the best things. And then like what Christine Dercoli says is, like, what if you can? And I think, like, the balance of, like, having those on, like, two sides on the same coin is, like, challenging yourself, but not being, like, crazy. Like, I haven't trained at all. I should do a century tomorrow, but also training smart. And I think there's so much, just follow the plan. There's so much accomplishment that comes from following a training plan and then getting the results. And whatever the result is, it's like, you were smart about it. You put the discipline and effort into following it. And I feel like there's so much when I followed a plan, and then had a goal versus been like, I think I could probably do this, and, like, I did it or whatever. Like, I just get so much more accomplishment from following plans and following, like, training and really having that discipline, and I think some of the joy from it isn't just the end result, but the journey there.
I think you're absolutely right. A lot of times while I'm riding, I'll get carried away in the moment and want to break records right now. But if you take a second and take a wider view of what you're doing over the previous 3 weeks, next 3 weeks, or previous 3 months, next 3 months, or even a whole year, like, what are you doing in a year? You don't need to ride as hard as you can all of the time. That's counterproductive. That's not quite how it
100%.
works. So
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is stick with the plan, follow the plan, and look at it as a bigger, longer term thing, and not just trying to break records on each individual ride.
Yes, I mean, like, so two examples to, like, further hone that in. When I was doing my ultra training, we got guidance from the coach. So her coach, he didn't necessarily give us all individual plans, but he's like, here's some guardrails. And because I love developing plans, I was like, took them and ran with it. And I stayed in zone 2 for, like, about 8 weeks, with, like, literally maybe 3 whole workouts that had some intervals. And with ultra, it's not like these quick intervals with, like, Peloton instructors. It's usually like, okay, we're going to do a 5 minute or a 10 minute, and then you go back to zone 1 because you have to think about your race conditions. So I literally, with 8 weeks zone 2, executed the plan perfectly. My FTP, when I went up 8.5%,
Just
just
from
riding
doing
zone 2.
zone two, right?
Yeah,
Just
and so
from
that's where
doing
it's like
zone two.
train. Yeah, and so that's why it's like, follow your plan that's right for your goals. Now, those aren't my goals right now. So your training plan was perfect for getting ready for this charity race. So there was a lot of other efforts that were above zone 2, but it was perfect. Follow the goals. I went above where I thought, my post-injury, post-burn fitness was, and it hit it. And I think the other thing we said about keeping the long game in mind is, like, I'm in my mid-40s. I'll go ahead and say that. And, like, I have this friend who's in her early 70s who's a, world-class age group competitive athlete. And I remember I had this stupid lower body injury, like leg injury from, like, weightlifting in February. And I felt so dumb. I even felt dumb calling my sports med doctor and, like, physical therapist. And she's like, you're doing exactly what you should. Like, that's what they're there for. That's their team. Like, just because it's not as big as when you had to be, like, carried off by an ambulance once, like, it's not like, she's like, this is what it's for. And she's like, I'm in the gym and I'm with my physical therapist and I'm doing workout stuff, and the other people my age, they're not doing as much. But you know what? That's what they're there for. And she's like, you have to keep the long game in mind. You take care of that injury smart now, and you're still going to be riding when you're in your 70s. And I've really thought about that conversation with her a lot, and a lot after, like, my burn injury and stuff. It's like, how do I set myself up today so I can still ride in my 70s?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think a lot of us are in the same boat in trying to get to our 70s or stay in our 70s and be active and healthy when we get there,
Yeah.
or older, So that's amazing. Good advice. And just to touch back on the zone 2 training for 8 weeks, pushing your FTP up without even riding in your FTP
Oh, yeah.
or above. That's a great story. And yeah, I think some of the folks in this challenge have had a taste of what what my rides are like versus the Peloton rides. And I've been offering the
Mm-hmm.
timers. And if you're doing a little bit extra time, it's basically do the rides or do the structured rides. And if you want to add time to it, add zone two. Straight up
Mm-hmm.
70% of your FTP, you can add 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, and you're doing yourself a lot of favor. You don't have to do extra intervals.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with if you really need to get on your bike because you feel like you need to be on your bike those extra days. Like, there's nothing wrong with riding your zone 1-2 line. You know, when I'm just wanting to have volume sometimes, like, I just ride that line. Like, when I was doing my ultra training, you know, and stuff like that. Or I had a 12-hour ride that I ended up doing indoors, which was, like, only bearable because of my Peloton friends. But it was like I wasn't confident about ice outdoors to be able to do
Yeah.
that, especially with the weather. And, like, so I decided to do it indoors. And I, like, around had trouble. I did 3 hour blocks with, like, about a half hour to kind of mimic the hardest part of race conditions. And I had a hard time with, like, one of the blocks. And I was like, you know what? I want to stay in zone two. And zone two, one line, if I'm, like, you know, a few watts, like if I'm 5 to 10 watts over it, I'm still in zone two, but I'm giving myself more of a break. And so I did that for, I think, like about an hour and a half. And then I was like, okay, I'm good. And then I popped back into, like, straight in the middle of my zone two. And I think that's where we're like thinking we have to have the perfect breath or we have something in our brain. And it's like you need to listen to your body. And part of that comes with, like, you know, experience. But I guess if you're new to the challenge and you're watching this, like, stand on Greg and my shoulders because we've been idiots. I'm going to speak for both of us. Tell me if this is true.
Oh,
We haven't
yeah,
listened
no,
to our
that's true.
bodies.
That,
And
yeah.
when you listen to your bodies, it's much better. And so, like, you know, make good choices and keep that long game in mind.
That's awesome. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, when I talked with Jamie, we switched hats. I gave her the coach hat for a little bit, and she said I absolutely have to take my FTP test. So I am going to take my FTP test. Well, tomorrow or sometime over the weekend. But then I have 2 weeks, so I'm kind of following the plan. I ride
Mm-hmm.
outdoors. I ride my gravel bike, my mountain bike. What do you suggest that I could do during the 2 weeks off of the training schedule?
Do you anticipate an increase in your FTP, or do you feel like life circumstances probably are bringing you down, or do you think steady?
It's probably going to be right. I have a little window.
Yeah.
Good question though. I have a little window for the past 5 years or so. It's right between here, and it's probably on the higher end from the beginning of the challenge. So it would be high. I don't need higher zones per se, but it would be nice to have the sense of accomplishment and achieve a few watts higher
Yeah.
on my test. And it's just good practice, I think. So you think I should go ahead and do it, or you don't?
So you should go ahead and do it. So you've got that and you know where you're at. And based on
All
the
right,
fact that
you
you
and
think that
Jamie
your
agree.
range is small, you know, like, do it. And if it's down or above, that could just because of, like, race day or FTP day conditions. Like, seriously, just because you're like a few watts or percentages lower than where you think you're going to be on your FTP, it could just be that day. Were you dehydrated? Was it really daggone humid in your basement? Never happened to me.
Good
But, you
point.
know, things like that, even with the fans, it's like 80% humidity. What are you going to do about that? Did your husband leave the door open to the balcony where it was 115 degrees out for 3 minutes while you were on FTP, and that affected your results? Never happened to me. I'm joking. That didn't
Spouses
happen
are
to
the
me.
worst for
We're still
FTP
married.
tests.
We're still married. I just don't FTP when they're in the house anymore.
Whew.
Yeah, but we are still married. But all that to say is, so, like, that could be, you know, the slip could be either way. But I think what would be really good is to just, like, do some endurance rides, maybe some endurance rides if that aren't of huge length that have more zone three, so that even if it's a small bonus, you're getting really comfortable with those, like, in tempo, you know, just feeling good in your tempo. And anybody who's tested and, like, gotten an increase, luckily Peloton, for better or worse, Peloton endurance classes have more tempo than they do zone two. As an ultra, I sometimes just don't listen to them and do zone two. But for those who are trying to prep for another challenge where maybe their goal is to increase their FTP again, tempo is really great, you know, and I think stick with that. And if you're feeling really strong, maybe do one ride with intervals that are, like, sweet spot, you know, so that when you're touching, you're kissing that bottom of your zone four, but you're not pushing it too hard because you're going to get into a new program. Greg's going to kick our butts, and we're going to love and hate him for it. And so just get really good with your tempo. Like, if you've increased, just get really strong with that tempo.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. It sounds like you can kind of make up your own thing, but there's no need to really push because, yeah, we're going to have some structure in a couple weeks and go and do the things you like. Maybe you like a class that's not even power zone related, or pull a class from the challenge that we've done in the past and compare your heart rate, or
Yes.
simply ride zone 2 and watch a movie, or get on the phone with somebody. There's or get on whatever while you're riding zone 2 and just move. So there's a lot of different options.
I mean, if you had an FTP increase and like zone two is wonderful. Like zone
Yeah.
two is a wonderful thing to be doing in between, and it's just going to keep giving you a base. Remember what I said about that 8 weeks and getting the 8.5% increase. So zone two is great. If you're feeling really confident, like do some zone three, but just like keep it easy because you're going into a new effort. Of course, like I'm not listening to that same advice because I'm going to do some hard intervals next week and then take some time off before this race. But that's also for me from a mental racing perspective that I'm like, I get a few of those intervals in, so then like when
Yeah.
I hop on it and like the person before me kept the average at 280 and I'm like, well crap, I guess I need to keep it at that
uh,
too. So at
that
least I'll
sounds
have some,
good.
I know, right? So it'll be fine.
I, I, I I just want to touch on one other thing, and I think a lot of us can relate to this as well, is just being busy with a career and a family and kids and trying to train and recover. Do you find that being productive with a limited amount of time is almost, it has to be that way? So I think a lot of us
Yeah.
thrive on being almost overscheduled. If I have a whole day to do something, almost guaranteed it doesn't get done. If I get
Well,
20
mhm.
minutes, a little, everything is scheduled. And man, well, I mean, we're talking about bike rides and working out. The workouts happen because they're
Yeah.
scheduled, and
Hmm.
there's just no missing because the next thing moves on. Do you find that you thrive on being a busy, scheduled person versus if there were ever a time when you were not, like on a vacation or something?
Yeah, so I want to go back in time and kick the butt of my non-parent self who thought she didn't have time. Like, what on earth? Like, she had loads of time, loads of time. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, you're an idiot. Like, you could have been like, I don't know, doing a lot of things. You did it. So, yeah. So, but luckily we can't time travel to like injure ourselves. But anyways, so yeah. So I do think. I mean, I think you like yeah. The same thing. Amount of time you have to do something is how you do it. I do think there's phases of parenthood or like life or work. Like when I used to travel 70% of the time, I didn't ride then. I ran. I mean, like I couldn't. This was before spin bikes were at every hotel, and it was easier to pack running shoes. So there are life circumstances that do it, but it's like figuring out how to make it work. I like the other day, it was not a riding day because I was testing the next day and we had CX that night. So I woke up, had a cup of tea, woke my daughter up, did a 20-minute like Peloton upper body workout, walked to school, came back home, baked a cake, then logged in for work. And then like lunchtime, packed the bikes, put a kryptonite lock on them so nobody would steal them because I do live in a city, and then like went up north of the city to go to CX practice, and
Yeah.
that's what it is. When I was training for ultra, it's like there was a day where like it was actually New Year's, and luckily we were off, and I had to do like I think 9 hours. So I did like 3 or 4 hours before it got like warm enough that it would make sense to be outdoors. Then I did like I don't know 40 or 50 miles by myself. Then my family joined me, and I have a tag along bike for my daughter, and she joined me for about 15 miles. Then we had like dinner and an outdoors at a place like at a place near the trail, and then we got home and we did a family movie and I did another 3 hours. So I got my 9 hours in,
Whoa.
but
That's
I made
hard.
the
Yeah.
sacrifice of like waking up early, then figuring out how to incorporate my family into it, and then how to incorporate my family again. So that's a lot of stuff I'll do. Or I'll watch like a movie with her while I'm on the bike, and things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, that's all awesome, and I think a lot of people will relate to that situation. Maybe not the ultra training, maybe not that level of it, but definitely the
Yeah.
overscheduled and busy, but still trying to fit in your workouts of real everyday people. What questions do you have for me? Not
um,
stump the coach. Easy questions.
I don't. Oh my gosh. I mean, That is really good. I've been trying to think about that, but I've been really in birthday party mode this week. So I think what intervals, so this coming week, I want to do some intervals to give you mental confidence for this charity race that I will probably be doing 2:10. And like at like, I mean, let's be honest, it's going to be at like a vomit level, and then we don't vomit for 50 minutes, and then we get back on the bike. That's kind of how we do it. So what would you recommend for my intervals? Like, I would like to at least do one that's like the 2:10s mimics it, and then maybe some shorter ones, just from the mental game. Doing it before always helps me. So
So the event is 2 10-minute intervals. What's the event?
2 hours, 2 hours, 6 riders.
Okay.
We're all doing 10 minutes, and I am like crazy about how we're going to have really quick rider exchanges and stuff. I've got it all planned. But
Okay.
so yeah, I'll do 10-minute intervals, and I'm going to be probably like in zone 5 more than a human should be. So what are your thoughts?
This week coming up, I would go, I mean, so really zone 4, maybe 105% of your FTP is what you can do
Okay.
for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
This week, I would focus on just below that number. I would not try
Okay.
and hit that number. I would go
Okay.
95% FTP for 10 minutes. Make it feel easy. Do your breathing,
Mm-hmm.
get your confidence. You know you have to go a little bit harder in the event, but you also do not
Yeah.
fatigue yourself for the event. So
Right.
those are your intervals, and it doesn't have to be 10 minutes. You can also do 8-minute intervals at 95%, just to rev the engine and get close to what that event is going to feel like. You have the feeling, a lot of imagery. Imagine yourself at the event. Imagine yourself
Mm-hmm.
switching fast and organizing your team and eating when are you going to eat beforehand so that you're fueled. A 10-minute ride doesn't really, it's hard to screw that up. You can
It's
overeat
hard.
right beforehand, but you're
Yeah.
probably not going to bung from being too under fueled. It's not long enough.
Yeah. That sounds
But
good. Yeah,
just
I
all of
think
the imagery, yeah, all of the things you can think of, and
visualizing.
set time aside in your day, or do it while you're on your bike pedaling easy, to really go through all the steps you're going to be going through that day to get your best performance. And then back
Sounds
it up a
good.
little bit. Imagine the sleep the night before and the sleep the whole week before. You need to eat well and stay stress free, and all of the things that we were talking about to bring your best performance to that day.
Sounds good. Yeah, and so for our athletes who aren't trying to kill themselves on the bike twice in like 2 hours with their CEO. Anyways, so like you've done it. So I've done this event before with him, right? And like the team. So all this visualization will be like brilliant for me because like I literally know what to visual. So you've done an FTP before. When you go into your next FTP, or maybe it's like zone 5 work and that's not your favorite, and we're in like week 6 or 5 and that's not it. You can visualize that. You can think about what does that feel like? What was wrong with my breathing? Or what were my opportunity areas? Let's not put judgment on it. What were my opportunity areas with my breathing or positioning, and think about that going into it. So, not everyone's doing the crazy stuff I do, but it's all applicable. And that's the thing, just like with the schedule, it's all relative to what people's goals are.
Yeah, sweet. Awesome. Well, let's wrap it up. That is
Okay.
awesome. Thank you for everything. I'm going to hit
Yeah,
stop
thank you.
on the record button.